Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Representative Sam Singh, a representative from the 69th District, and want to welcome everyone to our press conference today talking about per-pupil school funding. I'll be very brief. I want to have my colleagues say a few words, but then more importantly, have our two superintendents here really talk about what's at stake here for both of their school districts. I think many of us were surprised as we went through the appropriations process that we ended up not giving the appropriate set of resources to all school districts across the state. Many conversations were started at a very higher level, and then at the last minute, after a conference committee, we were surprised that many school districts only ended up with $50 per pupil. And there were some conversations about trying to find some common ground in those last couple days before we took our break. Those unfortunately did not happen, and so we want to start that conversation again now that we're going to be back in session next week. So my first colleague to talk today will be Representative Theresa Abed.
Thank you, Sam. I know personally how schools are struggling. I've worked in our schools for over 30 years. So I've seen what the cuts have done to our schools, and they continue to happen. I've worked in our schools in Eaton County, and what I have been seeing is that students are getting less supplies, their class sizes are getting larger and larger, and the needed resources that they need to be successful learners are being eroded away. This has caused many students to fall behind, and we're seeing that now around the state. Our kids need a world-class education. They deserve it, and they need it to succeed in the job market. We are shortchanging Michigan students by refusing to invest in the future. One of the things I saw this morning coming to work is the excitement that the kids have walking into our schools and seeing the enthusiasm and delight and joy in learning. We need to make sure that that continues and that we give them the tools that they need to be the successful learners and to continue that joy of learning. So at this moment, I'd like to turn this over to another one of my colleagues, Tom Cochran, to further talk about this devastating problem.
Thank you, Theresa. This is a devastating problem that no one can deny. The problem is that the Republican majority in Lansing is denying it. They had a chance to look back at the recent history of our school performance here in Michigan and understand that a major cause of our students failing is because they are not getting the resources that they need. In my district and every district, we can do better for our children. But the truth is, when we don't invest in our children, we not only hurt their future, but ours as well. Without a solid education, K-12 students won't be able to succeed at the next level, at college. And if they don't succeed at college, they're not going to be able to get those good paying jobs. And without that income, they won't be able to invest in our economy by buying locally in our communities and around the state. This isn't just a problem of today. This problem will affect Michigan for decades to come. And unless we are willing to make those changes, we need to do that now. This legislation will make those changes happen and ensure that the first step we're taking is for a prosperous future for our children. To speak further on this issue is Representative Andy Schor from the 68th District.
Well, thanks, Tom. Appreciate it. Thanks, everyone, for being here today. Today's the first day of school. Today was really exciting. I got to drop my kids off. Well, one of my kids off at school. The other one was carpooled. But you know, I dropped my son off, and it really gets you thinking about education, about the resources that we're providing, about the issues with our schools. And for me, especially in Lansing, focusing on how we make our schools better. I'm proud to have our superintendent here today with us. We can't fall behind, and when we only give a $50 increase after the many years of cuts, then we're not succeeding. I was proud to support the governor's original proposal and the bill that passed the House and the bill that passed the Senate. And then we got, at the last minute, a conference report which pretty much slashed most of the schools, slashed it down to $50. That's unacceptable. When you look at those smiling kids' faces and the teachers who are excited and refreshed and the administrators who are raring to go, you can't go in on day one and tell them, we're not giving you the resources that it takes to succeed. That's wrong. That's our failure. Unfortunately, the same is not true of cyber schools and charter schools who are getting the minimum 83. So we need to fix that. And that's what this legislation does. This legislation, at the very least, brings all of the school districts to a base of $83 increase. Our students and our schools and our teachers and our administrators deserve it, and I'm proud to support it. I'm going to have Sam introduce our guests.
Great. Thank you very much. So you can see from my legislative colleagues, we've been having this conversation for a period of time, and to see ourselves only at $50, you'll hear from our two superintendents what does that mean to their school districts. And so first we'll have them introduce themselves and kind of their situation within each of their school districts. But first up will be the superintendent of Lansing Public Schools. Yvonne.
Thanks, Sam. Thank you so much for initiating this conversation. So like all school districts, today's the first day of school. And like all school districts, we feel a tremendous financial pressure to do more with limited and, in some cases, reduced resources. And like my colleague here and many across the state, we are doing just that, providing excellent education, good programs, and a positive learning environment for our kids so they can learn and be competitive in a global economic society. We have supportive communities, families that get involved, and teachers and staff who make great sacrifices so our kids can continue to learn. However, when the new per-pupil funding allocations came out in July, many of us had to go back to our budgets and make additional cuts. We had to make assumptions ahead of time and anticipate the per-pupil distribution amount, and we were totally blindsided by the reductions and, quite frankly, embarrassed by the inherent inequities in the final allocations. On October 1st, the district's rate of contribution to MEPSers will increase by slightly less than 1%, which for our district is about $1.4 million. This translates to an additional $120 per student in increased expenditure. We did receive the $50 per pupil, but that leaves us short of covering the increase in MEPSers and the increase in the cap on health insurance, many other items, fuel, utilities, etc., which means that we have to, one more time, dip into our fund equity to balance our budgets. My school district is like every bricks and mortar urban district in Michigan. We are working tirelessly to reverse decades of decline. We've closed schools and reconfigured our entire student body of 12,000 students in order to maximize our staffing and outdated facilities. We have outsourced support services and negotiated cost-saving contracts. It's true that in Lansing schools we are doing new and innovative things to make sure that all students in our community have access to a great education, one that provides success for everyone, not just for some, and not in cyberspace, but in real time with real people. We are doing our part, and we need the legislature to do its part by restoring the per-pupil allocation to what is being proposed today. There is very little else that we can do to trim our expenses and still provide a quality education for every child that enters our doors. We think our youth deserve better. We believe that Michigan deserves better. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. And also to give perspective here from Mid-Michigan is the Okemos superintendent as well. Kathy.
Thank you. As many have stated, today was the first day of school for many children across the state of Michigan. Okemos Public Schools started our year with $40,000 less in state funding than we had last year at this time. That equates to the funding of a classroom teacher or a counselor or 2 classroom paraprofessionals. Okemos is one of approximately 120 districts in Michigan that was negatively impacted by the K-12 budget that was adopted in late June during the legislature's final sessions before breaking for summer. We had no advance warning. In fact, I was both surprised and disappointed in the approved budget. The approved K-12 budget actually decreased the net funding that Okemos Public Schools receives from the state in the amount of $10 per student. While admittedly, none of the original budget proposals, the Governor's, the Senate's, and the House of Representatives, resulted in that 3% funding increase for Okemos, at least those options would have been an increase over our 13-14 funding level. If no corrective action is taken, we will experience an approximate net decrease of $40,000 from our 13-14 funding level. That's just wrong. No public school should actually lose funding, donating back to the state of Michigan so other schools can experience a rather significant increase as compared to recent years. But only comparing to recent years, we can still do better. To be clear, I support the concept of equity and appreciate that most school districts are receiving the $175 per student increase in their foundation allowances. I am not suggesting that the funding for other public school districts be reduced. However, I also support the concept of adequate funding, which the existing K-12 budget does not address. It is my hope that this was merely an oversight because the budget was passed in such a quick manner and that full analysis of the impact was not possible. As the superintendent of one of the $50 increase per student schools, I encourage the legislature and the governor to adopt a fix to this K-12 budget for those approximate 120 districts that have adversely affected by the original action. Very similar to Lansing, we too have closed elementary schools through the years. We too have reached concessions with our employee groups. We too have reconfigured. There's nowhere to go that won't impact the education that our children receive if further cuts are necessary. I'd like to thank you to Representative Singh and the others for recognizing this need to address this critical funding issue.
Thank you very much, Kathy. And so very simply put, our bill takes what was discussed as a compromise in June to take us all of the school districts who ended up with only $50 or under the original governor's $83 up to that 83 level floor. As you can tell, when you have changes to the retirement program and system, you will end up causing more cost to a school district. So even when someone says it's a $50 per pupil increase, when you look at the net amount of money coming from the state, not everybody wins. Traditionally, we've had a 2 times the per pupil amount to help those districts that have had less money. But this time we passed a budget with $175 at the high end and $50. That's not 2x. That's 3.5 times. And so what we're trying to do here is find some level of equity. This is the compromise that was discussed, what wasn't able to come to fruition in June, and that's why we're bringing it forward today.